Good afternoon and welcome to the City Planning Commission special meeting.
Good afternoon. This is the City Planning Commission special meeting held at the City Planning Commission hearing room, Lower Concourse 120 Broadway. Today is Monday, July 8th, 2019. I will now call the roll. Chair Lago.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Capelli. Commissioner Cirillo.
Here.
Commissioner De La Hoz. Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the public meeting of Wednesday, June 19th, 2019.
On the minutes, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 1. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 1, CD4, C190253, HAM, in the matter of an application for a UDAP designation project approval and disposition of city-owned property concerning 201-207 7th Avenue. For a favorable report on calendar number 1, Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here.
No. This is the vote.
It's a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm present and I vote yes.
Commissioner Cirillo.
Yes.
De La Hoz.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck. Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
This is a really challenging project, and kudos to HPD and to the developer and to the community for getting it to happen. I do think some of the permanent affordability and enforcement of the homeownership resale restrictions continue to require some attention. I hope that get that attention as this moves forward to the City Council. I vote yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 1. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 2 and 3, CD5, calendar number 2C190273, ZSM, calendar number 3, N190274, ZAM, in the matter of applications for the grant of a special permit and for the grant of an authorization concerning One Penn Plaza for a favorable report on calendar number 2 and for adoption on calendar number 3. Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Cirillo, Commissioner De La Hoz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Especially happy to see the changes that the developer was able to make, or the property owner was able to make in this project as a result of city planning review and the public process, and I vote yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 2, and calendar number 3 has been adopted. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 4, CD5, C190291, PCK, in the matter of an application for the acquisition of property concerning the Spring Creek Park addition. For a favorable report on calendar number 4, Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Cirillo,
Yes.
Commissioner De La Hoz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 4. Sorry. Borough of Manhattan, or Staten Island, calendar number 5, CD2 N190362 ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 333 Flag Place for adoption on calendar number 5, Chair Lago.
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Cirillo.
Yes.
Commissioner Deleuze. Yes. Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Yes.
Calendar number 5 has been adopted. Staten Island, calendar number 6, CD3 N190343 RCR in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning Macon Avenue for adoption on calendar number 6. Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Cirillo,
Yes.
Commissioner Deleuze,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampashad.
Yes.
Calendar number 6 has been adopted.
And Mr. Singer, any other business before the commission?
No, ma'am.
Then the special meeting is adjourned.
Okay, welcome to the July 8th, 2019 review session of the New York City Planning Commission. The time is 1:11 p.m. The first item on our agenda has been laid over. The second item on the agenda, page 23, is a non-ULURP referral of a minor modification to a previously approved special permit in Brooklyn Community District 2. Our presenter is Kevin Kraft.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a private application by Brooklyn Urban Retail Partners, LLP, for a minor modification of a previously approved special permit to allow signage that exceeds the otherwise applicable regulations to facilitate the redevelopment of Admiral's Row on a portion of the Brooklyn Navy Yard in Community District 2, Brooklyn. The project site is located in the southwest corner of the 300-acre city-owned Brooklyn Navy Yard, which contains 4.5 million square feet of commercial, industrial, and community facility uses for a variety of tenants and is managed by the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. The area is accessible via public transit and is located within the transit zone. There are multiple bus stops adjacent to the site, as well as the Brooklyn Navy Yard Ferry Terminal is located within the Brooklyn Navy Yard complex, and the closest subway is the F train, approximately 3 blocks northwest at York Street and J Street. The project site is approximately 6 acres located at the northeast corner of Nassau Street, Flushing Avenue, and Navy Street in an M14 zoning district. The site is bounded by Navy Street to the west, Flushing Avenue to the south, and is surrounded to the north and east by the Brooklyn Navy Yard Industrial Park, which is zoned M31 and M12. The surrounding area is highly mixed use with residential, community facility, industrial, and commercial uses. To the south and southeast are the Wallabout, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill neighborhoods, primarily zoned M12 and R6B. To the northeast are the Vinegar Hill and Dumbo mixed-use neighborhoods, with a mix of residential and manufacturing zoning districts. Directly west of the site are the Farragut Houses, a large NYCHA public housing community, which is zoned R6. 2 more NYCHA communities, the Ingersoll Houses and Walt Whitman Houses, are a block away just south of the elevated Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. Across Flushing Avenue, immediately south of the project site, is the approximately 10-acre Commodore Barry Park. In 2011, multiple actions approved to facilitate a redevelopment proposal known as Admiral's Row Plaza. In 2016, there were revisions made to the site plan that were found to be in substantial compliance with the land use approval granted in 2011. The revisions included minor reconfigurations of building footprints, building envelopes, and parking areas. The approved project incorporates both new construction and the adaptive reuse of previously existing buildings on the site to facilitate a mixed-use development that includes approximately 287,000 square feet consisting of retail, including a Wegmans supermarket, as well as industrial and community facility nonprofit floor area within 5 buildings, as well as a group parking facility on the interior of the lot. Access to the site would be provided from driveways on both Navy Street and Nassau Street, Flushing Avenue. The project site is currently under construction and is nearing completion. As previously mentioned, the project site is located across Flushing Avenue from Commodore Barry Park and across Navy Street from an R6 district. According to zoning resolution section 42561, Permitted signage on zoning lots located in M1 districts that are across the street from a residential district or a park of 1/2 acre or more must comply with C1 district sign regulations. The proposed signs did not comply in terms of height and surface area with the C1 regulations. Therefore, as part of the original 2011 actions, the applicants requested a City Planning Commission special permit to allow signage that would otherwise not be permitted in the C1, or permitted across the street from a residential district or park. The 2011 signage special permit in conjunction with the related actions received community board approval, 7 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstention. The Brooklyn Borough President also recommended approval. Since the original sign approvals in 2011, a developer was selected, tenants have been identified, and architectural refinement over time have necessitated minor changes to the approved sign program. Therefore, the applicant is seeking a minor modification to relocate and rearrange certain signs to reflect changes to the sign programs for buildings A, C, and E. Building A is a 5-story, 92-foot-tall building fronting on Flushing Avenue and abutting the main vehicular entrance to Admirals Row Plaza. Building A will contain a supermarket on the ground floor, which serves as the anchor tenant, and industrial uses on the upper floors. The applicant is requesting 3 changes to the approved building signs. First, the Brooklyn Navy Yard identification sign would be shifted to the left by approximately 34 feet and would remain at the same approved height, width, and square footage as the original approvals. Second, the anchor tenant signage would be rearranged from a band sign measuring 6 feet by 30 feet to a rectangular sign measuring approximately 12 feet by 13 feet. The third change would be to shift the anchor tenant signage to the east by approximately 14 feet and would remain again at the originally approved height and square footage. Building C is a new 2-story, 32-foot-tall retail building located on the south side of the site, fronting on Flushing Avenue, that will have entrances on both the north and south sides of the building. The applicant seeks to reconfigure 3 signs. First, the applicants are proposing to rearrange group signage A from a vertical orientation measuring 17 feet high by approximately 10 feet wide to a horizontal orientation measuring approximately 10 feet high by 17 feet wide. No change in square footage is proposed. On the east side of the building, the applicant is proposing to shift the signage approximately 2 feet to the right, and again would maintain the approved 18 feet by 12 feet dimensions. On the Navy Street elevation, the applicant is proposing to shift the signage 3 feet to the right and would maintain the approved 18 feet by 12 feet dimensions. Building E is a new 2-story, 40-foot-tall retail building located on the northwest side of the lot along Navy Street near its intersection with Sand Street. The applicant seeks 2 changes. First, the applicant proposes to shift the anchor tenant sign approximately 72 feet to the west. And second, the applicant proposes to reconfigure the group signage for building C from approximately 8 feet by 20 feet to approximately 6 feet by 30 feet, and to shift that signage west directly below the anchor tenant sign. The proposed modification received New York City Public Design Commission approval in January 2019. And again, the project site is currently under construction and is nearing completion. The proposed supermarket located in Building A is anticipated to open in late October 2019. Thank you.
Questions from the commission? Oh, Commissioner Ortiz.
Not a question, but I guess an observation. I don't see any problem with the changes, but I'm curious about how much something like this costs an applicant to go through a special permit process for what are very minor changes. One of the bigger concerns that I have has to do with the costs that we expect businesses to incur for things that will help them attract customers, and I think this is one of them, so I just wanted to flag that.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Then we will refer this to the community board for 30 days.
The third item on the agenda, page 54, is a pre-hearing review of zoning map and zoning text amendments, site selection, UDAP designation disposition, acquisition, special permits, and city map amendments in the Bronx Community District 1, Brooklyn Community District 2, Manhattan Community District 1, and Queens Community District 9. Our presenter is Taylor Wolfson.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here today for a pre-hearing on the Borough-based jail system proposal, which was certified on March 25th. As a reminder, this ULURP application is part of a citywide effort to close the jails on Rikers Island and replace them with a more modern and humane system of 4 jails that will house a smaller population. The proposed jail site in the Bronx is at 745 East 141st Street in the Mott Haven neighborhood of the Southeast Bronx, the current location of the Bronx NYPD tow pound. The proposed jail site in Brooklyn is at 275 Atlantic Avenue in downtown Brooklyn, the current location of the Brooklyn Detention Complex. The proposed jail site in Manhattan is at 124-125 White Street in Lower Manhattan, the current location of the Manhattan Detention Complex. And the proposed jail site in Queens is at 12602 82nd Avenue in the Kew Gardens neighborhood, the current location of the decommissioned Queens Detention Complex and an adjacent surface parking lot. In summary, the application states that each of the facilities would have the same number of beds. Following certification, criminal justice reform legislation was passed at the state level. In response to that, the applicant has now stated that they project a population of 4,000 rather than 5,000, translating into 4,600 beds or 1,150 beds per facility. They plan to update this in the application. The facilities would be approximately the same size, though their heights would differ based on the differing lot sizes. A portion of the ground floor would be set aside for retail and/or community facility space to liven the streets surrounding the facilities. There is flexibility in the allowable uses to meet the individual needs of each community. Accessory parking would also be provided for staff. And lastly, following certification, the applicant has also stated that there will no longer be a centralized infirmary in Queens. This will also be updated in the application. The applicant is requesting a number of actions as part of this application. They are requesting 2 system-wide actions, a site selection for the borough-based jail system and a text amendment to create the borough-based jail system special permit. They are also requesting a number of site-specific actions to modify components such as FAR, parking and loading. They are seeking 3 city map changes and a number of actions to facilitate a mixed-use development in the Bronx adjacent to the proposed Bronx facility. I'd like to provide an update on design build, which New York City was authorized to use for the borough-based jail system to save both time and money. At certification, we noted that the Department of Design and Construction and the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice were in the process of forming a design advisory group to provide feedback on the design guidelines that will be incorporated into the design build RFP process. On May 30th, the design advisory group held its first meeting. They are continuing to meet on a quarterly basis, including their next meeting later this summer. The project management consultant team, including Beverly Pryor, who you met last month, was part of that meeting and is also meeting with city agencies to discuss their work and progress. This includes meeting with the Department of City Planning to discuss design considerations as part of the proposed facilities. At post-hearing follow-ups, we will go into more detail regarding these design considerations. An environmental impact statement was completed as part of this proposal. Of the 16 areas analyzed for each site, approximately 2 to 3 were found to have the potential for significant adverse impacts. As you can see on the screen, a final environmental impact statement is in progress. The borough-based jail system application was referred out to Bronx Community Board 1, Brooklyn Community Board 2, Manhattan Community Board 1, and Queens Community Board 9. Queens Community Board 8 also formally requested to review the application and submitted a recommendation. The Bronx and Queens Community Board submitted recommendations of disapproval, while the Brooklyn and Manhattan Community Boards submitted recommendations of disapproval with conditions. Common considerations of the community boards included the locations of the proposed sites, requests to reduce the size and scale of the proposed facilities, concerns with the process thus far, including the extensive community engagement, and the choice between allocating resources for these facilities versus other community needs. I will now outline the recommendations from the Brooklyn and Manhattan community boards. Specific to the proposed facility, Brooklyn Community Board 2 is supportive of the site location, but requests that the applicant reduce the FAR to less than or equal to 10 and the bed count to 875. They believe that this can be done due to the bail reform passed at the state and other decarceration efforts in progress, and by building a new separate facility for those with mental health and substance abuse needs. They believe that the extra funding from the smaller facility could be put toward other community programs. They also request the establishment of more community courts and youth programming, a training program for Department of Correction officers, a plan to improve the conditions and treatment of individuals at Rikers Island and at the borough-based facilities, and a plan and comment opportunity for detainee care during construction and following the construction of the new facilities. Manhattan Community Board 1 is opposed to the location, size, and scale of the proposed facility and believes that the application should be withdrawn in light of the decreased population projections and also to fit more in context with the surrounding built environment. They also question the loading requests as part of the special permit and oppose the city map action to decrease the width of White Street. They are concerned with how the city plans to maintain its projected population numbers and believe that the population should be spread to additional facilities. They are also concerned with the amount of information available in the application since this project is undergoing design build and requests more information on the plan and urban design considerations, as well as a post-ULURP process for review and comment. They recommend putting together a task force to study the impacts of the proposal, a community advisory board to provide feedback, and a community engagement plan for those in the adjacent Chung Pak facilities. The application was then referred out to the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens borough presidents. The Bronx and Queens borough presidents submitted recommendations of disapproval. The Manhattan borough president submitted a recommendation of approval with conditions, and we have not yet received the Brooklyn borough president's recommendation. Common considerations from the borough presidents included the locations of the proposed sites, an agreement on the need to close Rikers Island, and the importance of community engagement during this process. I will now go to the Manhattan borough president recommendations. The Manhattan borough president recommends building a new facility which will both reflect a new vision of incarceration and protect the surrounding community from negative impacts. The borough president supports closing Rikers Island and building a new facility at 124-125 White Street, but recommends reducing the size, the proposed height and bulk of the building. She recommends making White Street a 24/7 open-air pedestrian open-only plaza, increasing the number of loading berths and community facility space, and moving the staff to a different parking lot entrance. She recommends ensuring a transparent process through continuing community input, including working with Chung Pak and other small businesses to provide relocation support during construction and financial support in the long term, as well as the creation of a community advisory group and standing monthly updates to the community boards. The borough president recommends making additional commitments to reforming our system of incarceration. And included in that is additional training at the Department of Correction to work with those with mental health and substance abuse issues and to help those them gain a better understanding of gender preferences. Lastly, she recommends closing Rikers Island, including demolishing the buildings no longer in use on the island right now and committing to fully close it in the long term, while also ensuring that no housing or correctional facilities are placed on the island in the future. She also recommends moving the women's facility from the Queens site to the Manhattan site. Thank you, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the commission? Commissioner Delauze.
Thanks for that overview. You packed a lot of information in a few slides. Do you mind going back? I think you have a slide that was a design build slide. Great. I think, and this kind of is a theme that came up in a number of the comments, both from the community boards and from the borough president. Perhaps adding to this slide where in the process there is ongoing community engagement, or creating a new slide, whatever makes sense, I think would be helpful, because a lot of the recommendations have to do with that, and I understand that it's contemplated and that it's part of the plan, but maybe we're in a new world here, right? There's no longer this linear ULURP process that we're looking at, and these are very real concerns that I think if we want to address, we need to have an understanding from the onset about where the intentional engagement is with community and the various stakeholders. So I would find that really helpful, I guess, as part of review session. And then the other piece you mentioned from the get-go was that there was a plan to amend the proposal based on the decrease in population from 5,000 to 4,000, and then also the lack of centralization with the infirmary. Do we have any sense of how that reduction would impact all 4 facilities? In terms of height, FAR, that kind of a thing. If we have that now versus later, that would be helpful. And then, because I'm sure that's going to come up at the hearing on Wednesday as well. And then, so where is that centralized infirmary going to go if it's not going to be in the Queens facility? And is there another community that may be impacted that isn't being talked about? That would be helpful to know.
Sure. The applicant is still working on the updated heights and sizes of the facilities based on these new projections, and they can share that information as well as their ideas for the centralized infirmary on Wednesday. Yeah.
Commissioner Ramprashad.
Yes, I'm just going to jump in on Commissioner Delauze's comments, because I too was wondering if the reduction in beds would also mean a decrease in height, or actually from the beginning I've been wondering what the program is for each one of the facilities. Is it possible to get a breakdown of what that program is and what the current program is at Rikers, so I can compare the two? So for Wednesday. Thank you.
Sure. We'll talk with the applicants.
Commissioner Levin.
I was just thinking about putting my hand up, so. I thought you had handed up.
Mind reader.
I guess it's my turn, huh? Yes, I think your presentation, all these materials, the 2 sets of comments we've received really highlight the challenge that we have before us, which is that we're looking at a proposal that in one lens is a very large and very important citywide initiative to close Rikers and come up with something better. And I think even through the vehemence of the most negative comments, you find agreement that that must be done. And I expect on Wednesday we will get powerful testimony from many who have personal experience with the system and can reinforce for us and for the public the need to make those changes. And at the same time, we're dealing with more or less traditional ULURP applications about the size and shape of 4 separate buildings with a goal of having them fit into their neighborhoods, but with very little information about how that will really happen and how big these buildings really need to be. So I find myself wrestling with 2 separate things. One, the big picture responsibility for choosing siting. Are these the right locations, and is this the right system? And second place, knowing how important the very detailed analysis is that we usually go through in a ULURP application. And I'm asking myself whether we know enough now about the design to be able to make those individual neighborhood-sized descriptions, and whether it's fair to those processes to be doing it in one giant hearing, drawing speakers from across the city. So I kind of wish we weren't in that situation. And I wonder why it is that the city, well, I guess it was the presentation by the AECOM team that really brought home to me how far away we are from the kinds of design conclusions that will lead us to understand exactly what zoning waivers, what the elements of the special permit should be. So I just put that out there as an observation of a conundrum that I'm feeling in this process.
I'm glad to address both facets of it. One, with respect to the determination to proceed in one ULURP, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice will be presenting as one of the applicants on Wednesday, and we'll be able to address that. With respect to the questions about land use, urban design, the things that generally we tend to view as our realm, I can assure you we, the department, have been working closely with both the applicant and with the project management consultant. We thought it best to hear from the public before making the presentation to the commission about the type of urban design suggestions. Both Taylor and Frank, as well as our borough folks and our urban designers, are quite engaged in that. And we'll learn a lot at the public hearing. And at the review sessions, we will then, on a site-by-site basis, be prepared to be going through the suggestions that the department would proffer to the commissioners. Vice Chair Knuckles.
Thank you. This is a very minute calculation in terms of the larger proposed construct, but on page 63 of our report, this relates to Manhattan. In the third paragraph, it says, coincident with the location of the proposed White Street volume, there would be an excluded volume from the proposed maximum building envelope measuring 35 feet wide and 30 feet tall. And I'm just curious as to what that is. What does that refer to?
That is referring to the arcade that will be carved out over White Street to allow for a pedestrian thoroughfare through that will still connect as it does today. So the building will be built over it.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
The Bronx Borough President had a very specific suggestion about an alternate location. Is there anything that you would think we ought to know about that before we get to the public hearing?
Sure.
About
The feasibility of the,
about the specifics of that location.
yes, why isn't that in the mix?
I think that's a great, I would actually say it's a good question for the team on Wednesday to go through in more detail, and we can then come back and talk
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, I believe we had some previous information about it,
Yeah.
but a refresher would be helpful.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
And I would
separately,
also note that is, would be a good question to ask at the public hearing, not
Okay.
leaving it just for post-hearing review.
got it. And as to the Manhattan Borough President's suggestion that the women's facility be moved to Manhattan, is that something that the applicant is looking at? Or is that something we should ask the applicant about?
We would recommend, yes, asking the applicant. Yeah, because the facility that the borough president refers to is a state facility. So there may be.
The one on 110th Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
That doesn't take away from a very significant gesture, I thought, by the borough president in offering.
It adds a significant fact. Thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Actually, that was along the lines of my questions. It seems like there are a number of, proposals out there that modify perhaps the need for beds at some of these locations. You know, the women's, that potential, the women's detainees for Queens. Also, I know there's some discussion about what mental health detainees, where they might go. And I'm interested in, you know, it's a challenge for us, right? It's a moving target. And we understand that communities are trying to figure out how to bring these buildings down to a scale that's more appropriate for their neighborhoods. And I think we're all sensitive to that. So I guess, how do we balance that? I mean, and when does that opportunity come in to assess those strategies that might decrease the volume? You know, I'm a little bit lost as to how we consider that in this process, or how that gets considered, or even how communities are able to negotiate when there's so many moving components.
I think that's something that at the hearing it's a good thing to sort of have the applicant talk about. And then I think as we go forward, we would talk about too.
But in any case, we would be approving a scale that, sort of the largest scale, but the idea is that they could potentially be smaller, some of these.
Sure. And that's why I'm saying that, like, I think, like, as we go through the commission review process, let's have that conversation now after the hearing.
And then another issue, I think the ground floor plane in particular, you know, how the pedestrian experiences the ground floor is going to be really critical in how these buildings are, you know, contribute or detract from their surroundings. And perhaps it's a minor point, but, you know, in at least two cases, Brooklyn and the Bronx, there's a desire for retail and community facilities. And in both cases, the projections or the desire for the minimum of 20-foot depth for retail is a concern. For me, depth of that scale for retail just doesn't make for good spaces. And so I know that they could be deeper than that, but I wouldn't want them to be that narrow, because I think we'd have trouble filling them with the kinds of retail that would be additive to these communities, and they might end up being vacant for longer than we'd like. So that's something specific concern that I had about those.
Commissioner Levin.
Actually, just following up on that, I'm reminded that at the review session, we had a similar conversation about wanting to be sure that it was a quality experience on the sidewalk. And I had thought that the Department of Corrections was going to come talk to us about the security concerns that controlled what the sidewalk experience is going to look like. And I don't think we've yet had that discussion. I hope they'll be ready to talk about it on Wednesday and provide follow-up information, because I agree that's going to be really successful to fitting these very large and imposing facilities successfully into a neighborhood.
Commissioner Deleuze.
Just kind of following up on something Commissioner Ortiz said, it would be helpful for the applicant on Wednesday to talk about what are the critically interrelated things that are happening at the various locations in terms of programming versus the nice-to-haves. I mean, there's got to be some set of criteria that was developed to determine that this is the kind of programming that should be in each building, and I think just making that really explicit would be helpful, and, you know, obviously, that's part of what this discussion is, and these are very complex facilities and with people with needs. So certainly having things all in one space makes a lot of sense, but I think having an understanding of that would be helpful. Yeah, make it explicit.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
You know, subject to the various configurations of the sites, do you nonetheless anticipate that the exterior, like ground floor and community spaces of each facility would look essentially the same? Is there going to be a kind of basic template in that regard, or what do you envision there?
I mean, I think the facilities, I mean, their locations are all so different that it probably would not be the same. But I'm not sure beyond that what.
I'm just asking, is there a certain kind of uniformity that each facility would have to the other? Or, yeah, perhaps, yeah, design criteria.
I think there will be design criteria for the buildings, but the specifics of how that lays out on a ground floor may be different. Just the sites themselves are pretty different.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay.
If one just looks at the nature of the retail around the two existing facilities, the difference between Atlantic Avenue and Baxter and White Streets are very, very different, and I would anticipate would have to be carried forward in the facilities, in the ground floor.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really referring to the city exterior, but, you know, once you were in the facility, would there be a certain kind of uniform?
The sort of public-facing parts of the facility.
Yeah.
I think that's, I think that speaks to the program and kind of how the shared elements of each of the facilities and be worth the applicant going through on Wednesday. And that's a good question to it.
Also note that it was interesting, the different recommendations from the community boards. If we looked at the community boards that provided comments, in Brooklyn, there was concern about not competing with neighborhood retail. In Manhattan, there was an interesting continuing vibrant neighborhood retail in the newly provided space. And so I suspect that all of these are going to be factors that are going to have to be considered. Other questions? Okay, then we'll hear this at a public hearing on Wednesday. And again, just for both the commissioners and the folks in the audience, if you could, Mr. Singer, give us the location of the public hearing?
Yes, the commission will be meeting at John Jay College on 58th Street, Hannah, right? And the hearing will start at 10 o'clock in the morning. And
Gerald W. Lynch Theater.
the Carol W. Lynch Theater. Gerald.
And could you give us the exact street address?
524 West 59th Street.
524 West 59th Street.
Great, thank you.
And
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
as to the, will this be conducted as we typically conduct these hearings?
Yep.
In that people will speak in the order in which they sign up? We're not doing a Manhattan session and a Bronx session and a Queens session?
No, what we'll do is there will be a 15-minute team presentation, and then we will begin, as we generally do, with 5 speakers in opposition, 5 speakers in support, and then go back and forth.
Okay, okay,
Yep.
but we're going to end up talking
Yes.
about the entire city?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. For post-hearing follow-up, on the East New York North Cluster, know that HPD had a conversation. The borough office did want me to sort of convey that there's some discussions going on with HPD about further urban design coordination, which I think we'll report back to you at the next review session on. But if there's any further questions on this.
I just wanted to thank the commission for having raised these design concerns, and we're embarking on a process that we hope will be similar to and as successful as the work that we did on the child care centers, in which we worked with ACS to develop a list of cost-effective interventions that will make the buildings more appealing.
Okay. And the Kew Gardens Hills rezoning, I don't believe there are any outstanding questions on that one. I think that concludes the business I had. All right, this concludes the review session for Monday, July 8th, 2019. The time is 1:48 p.m.